If you've spent the last few evenings scrolling through endless monitor specs, watching YouTubers rave about 4K OLED, and still feel stuck wondering whether any of them actually fit into your workflow, you're not alone. That hesitation usually comes from two places: the fear of splurging on a screen that looks amazing on paper but ends up gathering dust, and the worry that you'll end up with a display that looks gorgeous for movies but falls apart when you need accurate colors for design work. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. In this video I'm going to walk through exactly how the ASUS ProArt display PA32 UCDM behaves once it's out of the box, who will genuinely benefit from its high-end features, and who would be better off spending that money elsewhere. Let's start with the environment this monitor is built for. ASUS markets it as a professional-grade tool for content creators, colorists, and anyone who needs cinema-level HDR while also demanding a buttery-smooth 240Hz refresh rate. That combination isn't something you see on a typical office monitor. In a real-world studio, you might have a dual-monitor setup, a regular 27-inch IPS panel for email and web browsing, and a color-critical screen for grading footage or editing photos. The PA32 UCDM is designed to be that color-critical screen, but it also tries to be a gaming beast with its 0.1 milliseconds response and 240Hz panel. The question is whether it can actually juggle both roles without compromise. First off, the picture quality is, as the spec sheet promises, eye-watering. The 31.5-inch QD-OLED panel delivers true 10-bit color, which means you get over a billion shades rather than the 16 million you'd see on a standard 8-bit display. In practice, this translates to smoother gradients in a Photoshop gradient fill, and it eliminates banding in dark scenes when you're grading a short film. The 99% DCI-P3 coverage is also a big win for anyone who works with cinema-grade color spaces. You'll see most of the colors that will eventually show up on a theater screen. The 1000 nit peak brightness combined with VISA Display HDR True Black 400 lets you hit the highlights in HDR content without crushing the blacks. The OLED's self-emissive nature gives you perfect black levels, something an LCD can't match. What makes this monitor feel professional beyond the raw numbers is the built-in calibration hardware. ASUS includes its own ProArt calibration tech, which works with a compatible colorimeter to store a hardware LUT inside the panel. I've seen a few creators on forums mention that after a quick 15-minute calibration routine, the monitor sits within an E less than 1 delta E tolerance across the whole color gamut. For someone who needs to hand off files to a client and guarantee that the colors match the spec, that's a real time saver compared to sending a monitor off for a third-party calibration. Now, let's talk about the 240Hz refresh rate. On paper it looks insane for a 4K OLED, but there are practical limits. The monitor supports DisplayPort 1.4 and HDMI 2.1, so you can drive the full 4K at 240Hz bandwidth, but you'll need a graphics card with enough HDMI 2.1 or DisplayPort 1.4 lanes to push that through. In my own test setup with a RTX 4090, I could hit 4K at 240Hz in a low-latency gaming mode, and the motion was buttery smooth, no tearing, no ghosting. However, most video editing software doesn't run at 240Hz. They're capped at 60Hz or 120Hz depending on the timeline settings. So if your primary use case is gaming, you get a premium experience, but if you're a video editor, that extra refresh rate may feel like a nice-to-have rather than a need. One hidden trade-off that pops up once you start using the monitor daily is the power draw. OLED panels are efficient when showing dark content, but when you push the screen to its 1000 nit peaks for HDR, the power consumption spikes noticeably. In a typical color grading session where you're working with bright, high dynamic range footage, the monitor can run warm and the fan on the back of the stand kicks in more often than on a standard IPS display. It's not a loud roar, but it's something to be aware of if you're aiming for a silent studio environment. Another practical consideration is the connectivity suite. The PA32 UCDM comes with Thunderbolt 4 ports, which is a massive plus for Mac users who want to daisy-chain a laptop and an external SSD while also delivering video, data, and power over a single cable. Windows users can also benefit from the USB-C delivery, but you'll need a compatible GPU that supports DisplayPort over USB-C to get the full 4K at 240Hz bandwidth. The monitor also includes HDMI 2.1, a USB hub, and a 3.5mm audio out, so you can centralize all your peripherals without clutter. For anyone who already has a Thunderbolt dock, this monitor essentially becomes a plug-and-play extension of that ecosystem. Who should definitely consider buying this? If you are a professional colorist, motion graphics artist, or photographer who spends hours tweaking color balance and needs the most accurate representation possible, the combination of 99% DCI-P3, less than 1 calibration, and Dolby Vision